The Democrats are so excited to run Kamala Harris for president. BS. I don't buy that for 1 second, but the show starts now. So it's been nearly 48 hours since Joe Biden's signature announced he wouldn't be seeking re-election. So that means it's been about 48 hours since the real insurrection on democracy, July 21st. Write that down. And look, as you know, I am not shocked at all that Joe stepped down, but I am still rather confused about why we've only heard from Joe, and in a very awkward way, might I add.
I know yesterday's news was surprising. And it was hard for you to hear, but it was the right thing to do. I know it's hard because you poured your heart and soul into me to help us win this thing, help me get this nomination, help me win the nomination, and then go on to win the presidency. But you know, you're an amazing team. But we've got a great. I think we made the right decision.
I mean, this is no small thing and should be a much bigger story. About 100 days before a general election, the candidate from one of the two major parties dropped out of the race via a post on social media, and that's it. And his statement alluded to him dropping out due to his inability to beat Donald Trump. That's not a legitimate reason at this point in the game, my friends. You don't get to subvert the whole primary process and then drop out 100 days before the election because you might lose. The Democrats call it patriotic because they wouldn't know what patriotism was if it bit them square in the butt. Quitting because you're losing ain't patriotism. And if that's not the real reason and Joe isn't in any way medically compromised or incapacitated, we need to know that. And not seeing him within 48 hours of one of the biggest and most significant announcements in history doesn't exactly inspire the confidence of the American people. And what about his vice president? Going into the weekend, she was last seen at an ice cream shop yucking it up with Tyra Banks. And yesterday, even after getting all of those endorsements, hundreds, raising all that money, we still didn't see a Kamala that is working to win a nomination. She's expecting a coronation, but more on that later. Joining me now to break down all of this from the other side of the aisle is former Bernie Sanders campaign advisor and former DNC Unity Reform Commission member, Nomiki Konst. Nomiki, I have so many questions for you. But first of all, I have to ask you this. We're expecting to see Joe Biden maybe any minute, any hour now. But up until now, we haven't seen him. Do you find that a little odd?
He had COVID. I know some people don't believe COVID exists still, but he had COVID. So as we learned over the last few years, you have to quarantine yourself.
Nomiki, you can't take a photo of the man? You can't take a photo of him?
I think that you guys are dwelling on details that are so irrelevant at this point. To say, where is he? He did a voice call. It's irrelevant. He was sick. We know he had COVID. No one who has a right mind is actually taking this seriously. It's the conspiracy theorists online who are just grasping at straws to find some sort of reaction because they don't have a strong campaign strategy against the Democrats now. I mean, Republicans hit their cap after the convention. They did not have there was no surge in the polls as there usually is after a convention. Donald Trump got shot. There was no surge in the polls. There was just an enthusiasm issue with Joe Biden. And now that enthusiasm is back and Republicans are looking for any opportunity to distract, including conspiracy theories.
Okay.
You know, there are even people online asking whether or not Kamala Harris is an American citizen. Are we doing this again? Really? How'd that work out?
I'm not getting into Kamala being an American citizen. That's not my issue with Kamala. But I do find it a little interesting that your side, you included, are calling us conspiracy theorists when we were called conspiracy theorists when we said that Joe wasn't going to be your nominee. I mean, every headline said that that was a conspiracy theory, and now he's not your nominee, and we don't have the right to question why we haven't seen him. I get that he has COVID, but he's got people around him. If he can put out a statement and he can drop out of the presidential race, for goodness sake, we could probably see a video of him. We could probably see some kind of a recording. We could see a flippin' TikTok of him. I mean, you could take a selfie. He could take a selfie video.
But when I had COVID, I didn't want anybody to look at me.
You're not the president of the United States, Nomiki. You're not running the country. You still have to run the country when you have COVID.
He's not on Big Brother. He has advisors around him. They don't have the right. Nobody has a right to follow him around 24/7. He's sick. Anyways, he's the president now. He's making a speech today, and that's what matters. So if you think that he was missing in action, what did you think he was? Where did you think he was? Because he's going to show up today and speak. So clearly he's alive.
Well, I don't think he's going to
it.
speak until tomorrow, actually. I mean, if he is going to speak today, that's great. I don't think we're going to hear from him at all today. I think we're going to hear from him at 8 p.m. tomorrow night.
Well, when he speaks, you will know that Joe Biden is alive. So that'll be settled. Now, can we move on to the real thing, which is the election between Kamala Harris, who has now got this surge of enthusiasm, has brought all of the Democratic Party together, including progressives, in defeating Donald Trump in Project 2025. And JD Vance's, ridiculous, bizarre comments about Kamala Harris. I mean, that is what we are here to defeat, and we are excited to do so. So I'd love to talk about the election.
Okay, we got a lot of Kamala talk. Trust me, I got a lot for you. But I do want to ask you, because you are a Democrat, you previously worked for Bernie Sanders, who also got screwed by the DNC. So I have to ask, for the millions of Democrats who voted for Joe Biden and he dropped out, and now Kamala is seemingly just being anointed to the post and to the position, do you think there needed to be a more robust conversation there, a mini primary as other Democrats had suggested? Or do you think that it is democratic? Do you think it's fair to voters on the Democrat side and just the American people that she is just being anointed into that position and doesn't really have to run for it?
Well, we voted for Kamala Harris. She was on the ticket. So people have voted for Kamala Harris. She ran for vice president alongside President Biden. So I don't think that's the question. I think there were people wondering how the process was going to go down. But, with the timeline that we have and the rules of the DNC, because this is how parties operate. This is how parties especially operated, before the 70s, including the Republican Party, is that it was an inter-party conversation. It's how parties operate all over the world, by the way. Internally, they have a conversation. They have votes with members who get elected from their areas. And that's what's happening right now. The mini primary was, are these delegates going to show up for Kamala Harris? Do these delegates want to see another candidate move forward? And the delegates who were elected in their communities, in their Democratic communities, party communities, they have said, no, we want to support Kamala Harris.
Well, they were elected to represent Joe, though. They were elected as delegates for Joe Biden. So
we're elected for the ticket, the Biden-Harris ticket.
Okay.
And
we don't even know who her VP choice is either. But I do want to ask you, maybe we'll hear more from Joe tomorrow night as to why he decided to drop out. From all we really have, the only indication is his statement that he put out on social media, essentially saying, I'm dropping out for the good of the country, for the good of the party, because it's been brought to my attention that I can't win. Do you think that that is a legitimate reason to drop out of a presidential race simply because you're losing?
I think it's a combination of issues. I mean, he has addressed the fact that if his health got in the way and he got COVID, he addressed the fact that if he didn't feel the Democrats were supporting him enough and he had that support, he would drop out. If the polls were reflecting that, he would drop out. And he did so. He carefully examined everything. He obviously went to the first debate. And listen, this is a Democratic primary. This is not the general election. This is Democratic voters, Democratic delegates, Democratic National Committee members making a decision in unity and talking to Joe Biden, including elected officials. So yes, he had every right to do so. That is part of the Democratic Party process. This has happened before, by the way. I mean, this isn't ahistorical. I mean, we've had this happen several times throughout history. In the really old days, they would just do it in the back room. So, we are lucky that we have elected DNC members and elected delegates who are enthusiastically supporting Kamala Harris. I mean, there is little to no pushback on this decision. People are happy. It's reinvigorating the party. And it's clear that Republicans are scared to death of this because their ticket is incredibly anti-women. And this election is going to be decided by women, not just because it's Kamala Harris, but because women are voting about their livelihoods at this point. When JD Vance wants to punish women, eliminate every single access to abortion, whether the woman's life is at risk, whether, he wants to make it so that a woman can't divorce her husband if she's in an abusive relationship. JD Vance called Kamala Harris a cat lady without children, and she's angry at the world, and that's why she's running for president. This is your ticket right now. So we can distract with all these other conversations, but the reality is that the Democratic Party is back, baby, and we're going to win this election.
Oh, if Coconut Tree is is y'all's
Yeah,
best
great.
Operation Coconut
Yes,
Tree
love it.
is underway. There's a
I'm
lot
all
that
for it.
there's a lot that you said there that I want to dig into, and I wanted to let you finish. I didn't want to pull a Kanye on you, and I wanted to let you finish. There's a lot there, though. I mean, the fact that essentially Democrat donors pushed Joe Biden out the door, I'm not sure if that's necessarily him stepping down. And I want to ask just a quick answer. Do you think that he went on his own, or do you think that they pushed him out the door?
I think it was a deep conversation. And of course, the donors did impact that. When enthusiasm was down, that includes fundraising, and this is an election, and the Democratic Party and down ballot races need to matter in the election. So I do think that the donors influenced it. I think the down ballot candidates and Nancy Pelosi and Senator Schumer, of course, came to Joe Biden about this. And I think fundamentally, he took a lot of things into consideration to make his decision, and I'm glad he did so.
Okay. A very different tune from Democrats from this week. Looking back just to last week, where we were convinced even over the weekend, his own campaign saying he's in it to win it. Joe's in it. How dare you question him? Real weird there. That's for y'all to sort out. I'd also like to point out, though, that you said that Donald Trump didn't get a bump in the polls after the assassination attempt or after the RNC. Well, if that's true, then how was Joe shown the polls that he was going to lose and that convinced him to drop out? Those things aren't mathing together there.
Because Donald Trump hit a ceiling. And what happened was Joe Biden's enthusiasm was reducing. And so he was going down in the polls, but Donald Trump was not gaining in the polls.
Okay.
Meaning Democrats were just not enthusiastic and weren't going to vote for Joe Biden.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, we agree on that. That much is for certain. I do want to play a clip because I have a feeling that you might agree with this, but I think that we're headed right now into 3 months of you can't criticize Kamala because she's a woman of color. But now also we're learning from the folks on MSNBC who pushed Joe out the door that it's also sexist if we mispronounce her name. Let's take a listen to this, and I want to see if you agree.
And I've heard from inside Republican circles and right-wing media that the hate campaign against Kamala Harris has begun. You'll notice they purposefully pronounce her name wrong. They say Kamala. They do it all the time. It is on purpose. But the talk is to start that hate campaign and get it going and start it churning.
Okay. So do you think that people are purposefully mispronouncing her name to take a dig at her?
Yes. Yes. I think just as Roger Ailes once advised everybody at Fox News to say Barack Hussein Obama, just as now
well, Nomiki, that's his damn name.
Party.
That's his name. We didn't give him that name. That's his name.
I mean, you don't call me Nomiki Daphne Konstandakis Gribizi. Like, you call me Nomiki Konst. That's my name. That's my name I go by. But he wanted to emphasize that, obviously. I mean, that's been written about. Just as Republicans are now calling Democrats, not the Democratic Party, but the Democrat Party, because they're running away from the fact that you guys were backing the insurrectionists. I mean, that you are a threat to democracy. The conservatives are a threat to democracy right now. So there are all these little tricks that you guys use, but it doesn't really work. It's silly town. They think it's death by a thousand cuts. What I'm concerned about is the actual misogynistic attacks like JD Vance has been making or Nigel Farage made this week against Kamala Harris.
Well, Nigel Farage doesn't represent any of us. He's not even in our damn country. I mean, I don't really care what he says. And I don't take what he says as being the mouthpiece for the Republican Party in the United States of America. I will say this. I always make the attempt to pronounce everybody's name correctly. Sometimes I mispronounce people's names. I happen to know that her name is Kamala because I lived in California, so I know how to pronounce her name. But I do think that there are folks out there that just look at that name and they don't know how to pronounce it and they're not familiar with it. My name is Tommy. Your name is Nomiki. Not easy names to pronounce either. When people mispronounce my name, I don't take it as that they're necessarily sexist and they're trying to make a dig at me. I just give people the benefit of the doubt usually that maybe they look at my name and they get confused. So I think sometimes it's an honest mistake. Some people should learn her name. I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Vice president. I mean,
you should learn her name. I don't disagree with you on that point. And I do want to give you this. I do believe that the strongest point that the Democrats have to run on, and maybe the only thing the Democrats have to run on, is the abortion issue. And I do believe that it's going to be a weak spot of the Republican Party. That was my one hesitation with JD Vance as the running mate, is that was going to be brought up. And I know it's going to be brought up and I know it's going to be used. If I were a Democrat, I would use it too. However, can you at least acknowledge that Donald Trump has said more than once that he does not support a federal abortion ban. Can you at least acknowledge that and not say that he supports a ban, that he's going to ban abortion? Because he has said multiple times, flat out, I'm not seeking a national abortion ban.
He has said that, and he also appointed 2 justices to the Supreme Court who just don't believe that, and that's been, reflected in their rulings with Dobbs. He has chosen a running mate who doesn't believe in that, so he might say that, and the Republican Party platform has obviously run away from that, as was reported last week.
Wouldn't you be happy about that, though? If the Republican Party was evolving more towards the middle on that issue, I was happy to see it. As somebody who's a moderate on that issue,
and I give you credit for that.
So wouldn't you be happy though that the Republican Party platform is moving away from a hardline stance on abortion? Wouldn't that make you happy to see some progression there?
It would be happy to see the candidates that are running on the Republican line follow that platform. I would be happy to see that. I would be happy to see, folks in Arizona, folks in Texas, folks in New Mexico now. I mean, they're coming all over the United States. There are conservatives who are running in the most extreme versions of not just abortion rights, but reproductive rights, shutting down clinics. I mean, women now, if you have a cyst burst in your ovaries, you have to get in a car and drive 3 states over because that's an emergency and it's life-threatening. I mean, this is just basic healthcare at this point. And there are plenty of folks running as Republicans right now who are running on a platform that is not the national platform, but a platform that is punishing women and turning this country into a handmaid's tale. And that's why I think Republicans should be concerned. It's that the majority of Americans believe that there should be a path to abortion in some way or form. The majority of Americans, almost all Americans, believe that we should have open health clinics. This is not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. This is an American issue. And it's pretty scary when there are Republicans in state legislatures across this country running complete opposite to that. And, and I think for you, Tomi, you've been very courageous in standing up to this. And I think, if you have influence, you should be pushing the Republicans to get rid of these.
Listen, I have said it more than once that it will be a losing issue for Republicans. I mean, I've been on the record all over where it's unpopular saying that Republicans will lose on this issue. I believe that Republicans lost in 2022 on that issue and their failure to message it correctly. I agree with the Dobbs decision. I believe it's a states' rights issue. So I don't disagree with that position, but I do disagree with a federal abortion ban, and I do disagree with legislatures that have a hardline stance on it. I don't agree with it. I think it's losing. So I'm very much on the record for that. I do want to ask you, though, outside of that issue, and I get it that you guys are going to run on that, and I don't blame you. That's the best thing you have right now. But you have to explain this to me. Up until maybe 2 weeks ago, nobody was talking about Vice President Kamala Harris, even within your own party. And I'm not talking about the Republicans. I'm talking about the Democrats. When they would say, we want Joe to step down, or Joe needs to step down, or Joe needs to be replaced. Very few folks out there were saying Kamala Harris. And I had many on my show, and Kamala was not the first name, the second name, or the third name. In fact, there were many names ahead of her. So you have to explain to me why in just 2 weeks' time, it went from saying names like Gavin Newsom and Whitmer and Shapiro and others to Kamala Harris being the anointed candidate in 48 hours.
Well, I do think Kamala Harris's name was being brought up. I'm on a lot of these. I'm in a lot of these conversations. I'm on a lot of these emails. I'm in a lot of these chats. Kamala Harris's name was absolutely being brought up, and part of that is not just is she a great candidate for this moment, but she's also on the ticket. And so just fundamentally, a transition is much easier because, she's in the same committee. As I said, Democrats voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. And that Biden-Harris ticket is also the campaign account. It is also how the ballots are going to be operating. So it was not only a smart decision for demographics in this country, to excite this country, to excite Democrats and young people and people of color across this country, but it is also just logistically much smarter. Now, Gavin Newsom, Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, they're phenomenal candidates. And I think we would have done just as great with any of them. In fact, I was excited to see their names dropped in because it shows that we finally have a bench. My God, it's taken enough time to have an enthusiastic and experienced bench for the boomers to step aside. So this is really exciting to me. And I'm very much looking forward to see who Vice President Harris chooses for her VP pick, because maybe it is one of them.
Yeah. That'll certainly be interesting. I do have to ask you, though, outside of, I understand that Kamala's main thing is going to be the abortion issue, and you've made your point very clear on that. I don't disagree that that's a good strategy for her. But outside of that, in the last 3.5, nearly 4 years, what has Kamala Harris done as vice president that you would count as an accomplishment of note?
Well, I think that's a peculiar question because vice president doesn't, they're part of the agenda for the administration. It's what does the administration do? What did the Biden-Harris administration do? It's not like she has her own set of...
But to be fair, though, Nomiki, she was given several jobs, one being the border czar. So let's just start there. Do you think Kamala Harris, as border czar, gave confidence to the American people that she can manage a task?
Well, I don't think it's managing a task. We have the Department of Homeland Security that manages it.
But she was given that job by the top of your ticket, by Joe Biden. Joe Biden gave her that job. Do you think that she did a good enough job at that job to convince the American people that she can manage things?
They gave her the job of going and speaking with leaders in Latin America. That is not managing the border crisis. That is the Department of Homeland Security. So let's be very clear on that. She also went overseas. She met with NATO leaders. She met with European leaders. And she's been a great advocate, especially in the last, I'd say, 2 years, really stepping up her game when it comes to foreign policy. And this is somebody who, in her history and as vice president, she's been very active about taking on big corporations with corporate malfeasance. As we know, she's been saying over and over that she has prosecuted corporate criminals like Donald Trump. She knows what it takes, and she continued to highlight that while she was in the vice presidency. Climate is a huge issue for her right now. She was in California as a senator. She carried that through in the Biden-Harris administration. The Inflation Reduction Act was the most important piece of climate legislation in history, and that was part of this administration, and that was part of her advisory. So yes, I do think that she is going to be able to expand, of course, the Biden-Harris accomplishments and continue to grow and push this country towards progress because we have so much to do. Is the border issue solved? Of course not. You know, I have family on the border in Arizona. I have family on the border in Mexico, actually, of Arizona. And so I deeply understand how difficult it is to be there. And the management, but it doesn't start at the border. This is an issue that goes back to the insecurity in central and parts of Latin America and southern Mexico and central Mexico. It has to do with cartels. It has to do with taking on drug flow. This is a much more complicated issue than locking up minors at the border, which is inhumane. And that's where we're going to go if we go back to Donald Trump. And if people really worry about
you mentioned, Nomiki, you mentioned the polls, though. You mentioned the polls about the American people supporting access to abortion. Well, the polls also show that the majority of Americans, even Democrats, support mass deportation. So I'd have to push back on that. I do think that the border situation is solvable, and I think Donald Trump was solving it. And when we talk about instability in other countries and the cartel and all this, I mean, funding the cartel with an open border is probably not the way to address it. I'm going to have to bring you back so we can dive into border issues because that could be a 4-hour show, and I would love to discuss it with you. But I do have to ask you on Kamala Harris's record, how are y'all on the Democrat side going to get around the issue of her locking up low-level marijuana offenders? Because that's something that's going to come up.
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. I think it will come up. I think progressives brought that up during the primary in 2020. I mean, it came up quite a bit. With that being said, you know, the policies are a little bit more complicated. I mean, she wasn't just minor offenders. It was multiple aspects of our drug laws, but the country has evolved and she's evolved and Democrats have evolved. And thank God, because that is what the progressive movement is supposed to be doing. We are supposed to be pushing our lawmakers to become more progressive. If they're not progressive, we push back. You know, President Obama once said, I want to hear you guys show up in the streets. We showed up in the streets and it pushed him to legalize gay marriage. I mean, it pushed him on so many different issues. This is how this works in politics, right? So she was operating as the AG, she was operating as a DA at the time, and she was operating on laws that she didn't pass. Do I agree with those laws? No, but they have been changed, and thank God they've been changed.
Well, I will say this, the Democrat Party platform should just be let them all out, because that's where y'all are headed. Let them all out. I don't know if the American people are stoked on that. But another thing that I do want to talk about, and I understand that it's a touchy subject and I understand that it's uncomfortable, but it has to be discussed. for the last, especially the last 5 months, we've been talking about Donald Trump paying off a porn star. And it's been Donald Trump, the convicted felon, Donald Trump and the porn star, Donald Trump, grab her by the pee, all this stuff. And it's been a big conversation on leftist media. It's been a conversation in the Democrat Party platform. Do you think it's fair to have discussions about Kamala Harris and how she got her start? Not by any conspiracy theory, but by the admission of Willie Brown himself. Do you think that is fair to have that dialogue about her, given all the discussion on Donald Trump and maybe some of his unsavory behavior?
No. This is a woman who went to 2 Ivy League schools, including, law school. This is a woman who was working very hard, and he was her mentor. Did they have a relationship? Yes, and she's been public about that. But it's completely irrelevant to a conversation. It wasn't a porn star. It wasn't illegally, sending funds to somebody. This was a real relationship that emerged out of a working relationship. She was working. It wasn't like she up from obscurity. She was, she went to 2 Ivy League schools. She's extremely accomplished.
I'm not saying that she didn't go to Ivy League schools. Her family, not exactly middle class either. I mean, she comes from a prominent family of well-educated individuals. But I'm just asking you, when Willie Brown, not Tomi Lahren, when Willie Brown says that he created positions for her, or he advanced her because of their relationship, do you think that that is a discussion and a dialogue that is appropriate to at least have?
No, I think that's something that would be had in 1965. We shouldn't be talking that way about any woman, because when it's left to a man, of course, they're going to take credit for their careers. I don't know Willie Brown. I'm sure that, they have a decent relationship. But if I were Kamala Harris, I would roll my eyes at that and say, really, you were the one who worked your way through law school. You're the one who worked your way through these jobs. You're the one who got me into the vice presidency. And now, as the nominee for president, I beg to differ with Willie Brown. But, maybe he offered her some advice along the way. Maybe he opened some doors. But that's what mentoring does. That's what community does. But he does not take credit for Kamala Harris's career. Yeah. Kamala Harris did that work.
I just think it's interesting because of the whole Me Too movement thing and talking about, in Hollywood, especially in California, the casting couches and all of this, and how, women being put in positions where they felt like they had to do certain things to advance their careers. I mean, that was a discussion of the Me Too movement. So I just don't know why we can't have that discussion now. I'm not saying that she was made by this and all of her accomplishments can be attributed to that. I'm not saying that. I don't believe it. I really don't. I don't like Kamala Harris. I don't like her policies. I do think that she, in an education capacity, I do think that she is an educated individual who has attained many positions that cannot be scoffed at. I will give you that. However, I think to completely shut down a Me Too conversation, I don't think that logistically for the left makes a lot of sense. But I understand.
That's not a conversation. I mean, Me Too was about women coming forward who felt like, they were being oppressed or violated. She has not done that. They were in a relationship. Okay. It was, maybe not something that publicly people wanted to know about, but as far as I understand, she hasn't come forward, and she probably won't come forward saying anything otherwise. Yep. Me Too is about empowering women who have been violated, who have been sexually violated, who have been harassed in workplaces, who've been punished for not acting sexually in response. We know all of the stories of Me Too, but it's about the woman coming forward and empowering the woman to share her story and shedding light on men who've been able to get away with really inappropriate behaviors against women and punishing women in many situations when they don't respond. I don't think that's the situation at all.
Okay. Well, you know what? Neither one of us know, because we weren't there and we weren't in the relationship. So I do think, though, it's going to come up. I don't think it should be the main talking point. Certainly, I think policy should come first. But I do think it's going to come up. So I think that the Democrat Party and the Harris campaign, they're going to have to address it if they want to hurl mud at Donald Trump. It's just something that's going to have to come back. So I think it's going to be part of it, but there's a lot more discussion to be had. Are you confident that a Kamala Harris and whoever ticket is going to defeat Donald Trump and J.D. Vance?
I am so confident at this point. I see this enthusiasm and know where the Trump-Vance ceiling is, and to see the issues that we're going to be running on that the majority of Americans stand for. I think we're just fighting against the clock right now, but what we've been able to do in the last 48 hours gives me so much hope, and I'm very excited. And I hope that, Tomi, you too are going to be moved by these policies, because I can already see that there's been so much movement in your career and in your political philosophy, and I hope that we can bring you to the other side, because you'd be such a great advocate. You're so articulate, you're so smart, and you're so good on camera. So why don't you just become a Democrat? Let's do this.
No, Miki. I mean, Good luck with that. You have a better chance of freezing over hell with an ice cube than having me go to the Democrat side. There really actually hasn't been much progression in my philosophy. I've always been more moderate on abortion, but that's really where it ends. I'm a pretty hardline on everything else, but I appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming on with me. You and I go way back. We've had these discussions for a long time, and I'm glad that you're having them with me. I think we need more of this, especially women on opposite sides having a good discussion. So please come back. I really appreciate your time, and best of luck with Operation Coconut Tree.
Good luck with keeping Project 2025 alive.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thanks, Nomiki.
Thank you.
All right, folks, Democrats are flocking to support Kamala Harris right now, but I don't buy it, and I'll tell you why, because it's time for final thoughts. Since Joe Biden's signature dropped out of the race on Sunday afternoon, Insurrection Day, presumptive nominee Kamala Harris has raised more than $100 million, and that's an impressive amount for sure. She's also received hundreds of endorsements from fellow Democrats, including the most important one, in my opinion, Nancy Pelosi. So I can see why most people are convinced she will be their gal and their nominee, but even so, I'm still not fully convinced. First of all, have you listened to Kamala lately in the last 4 years? Joe without the dementia.
And talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do.
The ability to see what can be, unburdened by what has been. Be able to see what can be unburdened by what has been. What is possible unburdened by what has been.
I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit.
I love Venn diagrams. I really do. I love Venn diagrams. It's just something about those three circles and the analysis about where there is the intersection, right?
I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
You know what also excites me? Among the many things, I'm excited about electric school buses. I love electric school buses. I just love them for so many reasons. Maybe because I went to school on a school bus. Hey, raise your hand if you went to school on a school bus, right?
That's not even a fraction of it. There is more. Like this god-awful presidential pitch from just yesterday.
Joe, are you watching? You hear this clapping? Can you see it?
I'm watching. I'm watching.
I knew it.
Joe's legacy of accomplishment, just over a lifetime, but just over the last 3.5 years, is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who served 2 terms in office.
Over my dead body will she be elected the first female president. But while she may have a cornucopia of bad, weird, and awkward moments, what she doesn't have a lot of is accomplishment. Not as vice president, anyway. What has she done? I can't think of a damn thing, y'all. She was the border czar and presided over the largest mass invasion in history. And according to Border Patrol Chief Jason Owens and former Chief Raul Ortiz, Kamala hasn't so much as spoken to either of them. But overseeing a mass illegal immigration invasion doesn't disqualify a Democrat. I get it. In fact, she fulfilled that goal for her party. But I still don't buy that Democrats want her on the top of their ticket. And another reason I say that is because up until about maybe a week and a half ago, no prominent Democrats or media pundits were even floating her name as the preferred replacement. This is all brand new, and it's rather perplexing. All she has is the abortion issue and her own identity politics. But honestly, I'm not sure how successful the history-making first female stuff is going to play. It didn't work in 2016 after all. And we've been so woked to death since, I think most folks are just tired of it. Also important to point out that the party that can't define woman wants you to vote for a woman because she's a woman. The irony is astounding. But like I said, I don't think Kamala Harris is endgame for Democrats or for America. If they do anoint her to the top of the ticket, which looks like it's going to happen, it'll be because they've already accepted defeat and she is the sacrificial lamb, just like Joe. But hey, those are just my final thoughts. Please be sure to tune in again live tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. Also, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday and I hope you'll join me.